Stop scrolling. Yeah, you. If you're hearing this, you're already in the right place. This isn't just a podcast, it's an experience. And the deeper you listen, the harder it is to pull yourself out. So don't skip. Don't pause. Just listen.
I want you to just take a moment and picture yourself in a really crowded space. Like, really try to visualize it right now.
Yeah, like maybe it's a bustling train station, right during the morning commute.
Right, exactly. Or maybe like a highly popular coffee shop right at the absolute peak of the lunch rush.
Oh yeah, those can get overwhelmingly busy.
Exactly. So look around that space in your mind's eye and pay attention to the sensory details. You smell the roasted espresso, you hear the ambient hum of 50 overlapping conversations.
All those little background noises?
Yeah, and you watch people navigating around each other with this sort of unconscious, fluid grace. And when you really observe it, you are looking at a perfectly, almost astonishingly predictable structure.
It really is when you break it down.
Right. People are walking and talking, and they're living out their highly ordered routines. Everything just meshes. The conversations at the tables next to you, they seem to fit together in this flawless ambient symphony.
Because everyone is following the social script.
Yes. The schedules align perfectly. A barista hands over a cup at the exact millisecond the customer reaches out. A commuter steps through the closing doors of a train with like a fraction of an inch to spare, and they never even break stride.
It's a rhythm.
It is a rhythm. The daily rhythm of human life hums along exactly as expected. Everything appears absolutely fundamentally stable, but occasionally inside that stability.
Right, inside that perfect hum.
Yeah, inside that perfect, unbroken hum of the everyday world, there is a very quiet, completely unexceptional thought that surfaces. And you have likely had it before.
Most of us have, honestly.
Exactly. Usually when staring out a rainy window or, driving down a long, empty stretch of highway, it's just a brief passing whisper in the back of your mind that asks, what if this isn't real?
It's kind of the ultimate intrusive thought, isn't it?
It really is.
And human biology, especially when combined with our psychological conditioning, dictates exactly how we handle it, because typically you simply ignore it.
You just push it away.
Right, you blink, you shake your head, maybe you take a sip of your coffee, and you immediately anchor yourself back to your immediate surroundings. You dismiss it as a byproduct of stress, or maybe fatigue, or just a weird trick of the light.
Like, oh, I just didn't get enough sleep last night.
Exactly. We are biologically wired to seek patterns and stability. To genuinely entertain that thought, to truly stop and consider that the fabric of your reality might be a construct, is to invite a level of existential vertigo that the human mind is practically built to avoid at all costs.
But that avoidance is what's so fascinating to me, because our mission for today's deep dive is to, well, pull that exact thread.
We are definitely abandoning the safety net today.
We really are. We're diving into a profoundly terrifying concept from our sources today. The idea that human reality, as we perceive it, is nothing more than a simulated structure.
A facade, basically.
Right, but not just a simulation for the sake of it, A facade specifically designed to mask an infinite, chaotic multiverse. We're going to trace the psychological and cosmic journey of an individual who notices a subtle glitch, refuses to look away, and then inadvertently collapses their entire perceived world.
And I think we should establish up front that looking at this purely through the lens of a sci-fi thought experiment really does it a disservice.
How so?
Well, what we are really analyzing here is the architecture of human perception. It's an exploration into cognitive filters, the absolute crushing burden of infinite awareness, and frankly, the terrifying unavoidable cost of human curiosity.
The cost of just asking questions.
Exactly. This narrative forces us to ask what it actually means to perceive reality, and more importantly, why the limitations of our perception might actually be the only thing keeping our consciousness intact.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I'm stuck on that concept of glitches in the environment. It starts so incredibly small.
It really does. It's never a massive explosion.
Right. The narrative suggests that when you choose not to ignore that whisper, when you actively hold on to the thought, what if this isn't real? The world doesn't explode. The sky doesn't fall.
There's no dramatic movie moment.
No. Instead, the absolute smallest anomalies begin to show. We are talking about noticing a tiny delay in a sound across a room. Like you watch someone drop a metallic spoon on a tile floor, but the sharp clatter reaches your ears just a fraction of a second too late.
which is an incredibly specific and unnerving detail. I mean, in our normal organic reality, light travels faster than sound.
Right. Basic physics.
Yeah, and our brains are incredibly adept at processing these differing speeds and stitching them together into a cohesive, simultaneous experience. We have this temporal processing window that masks minor discrepancies so the world feels synchronous.
So our brain is already acting like a bit of a filter.
Exactly. But what this narrative describes is a delay that falls just outside that window.
Right.
It's not a biological misfire, it's a systemic desynchronization.
It reminds me of watching a movie where the audio track is out of sync by maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 frames.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
It is. It's just enough to make you feel mildly nauseous. Like, if you aren't paying close attention, you might just rub your eyes and blame a lack of sleep. But if you stare directly at the actor's lips, you realize the audio simply does not match the physical reality.
It's undeniable once you focus on it.
Right. And then there's the other anomaly from the sources, structural looping in conversation.
Yeah, the structural looping is even more insidious than a delayed sound, I think.
Because it's not as obvious.
Exactly. It isn't people repeating the exact same sentences like a broken record or, a poorly programmed non-player character in a video game. It's much more subtle than that.
How does it manifest then?
It is different words, entirely different topics even, but they are filling the exact same conversational shape and rhythm over and over again. The cadence, the specific length of pauses, the rising and falling emotional inflections.
Like the musicality of the conversation is looping.
Yes, precisely. They follow a rigidly defined algorithm. It's almost like a mathematical fractal applied to human speech.
Wait, hold on though. I have to challenge the premise here.
Okay, go for it.
If this reality is a hyper-advanced simulated construct capable of rendering an entire universe, why are there glitches at all?
That's a fair question.
Right. Because a system that's sophisticated shouldn't be dropping frames because a spoon hit the floor. Is the implication that the system is ancient and inherently breaking down over time? Or is it something else? Like, is the listener's awareness suddenly outgrowing the code?
It's almost certainly the latter, based on how the environment reacts. The system isn't failing globally, you see. It is experiencing localized friction.
Localized friction. Okay, explain that.
Think about how computational systems allocate resources. They are designed for maximum efficiency. They assume passive, predictable participation from the processes running within them.
So it expects us to behave normally.
Right. The reality we walk through every day relies heavily on predictive behavioral models. It assumes you will follow the script. When you deviate from that script, by actively questioning the very nature of the construct, your consciousness becomes an unpredictable variable.
Oh, I see. So by focusing on the illusion, I'm suddenly taking up too much RAM.
Basically, yes.
I'm forcing the system to actively render things it usually just leaves in the background. Like it normally uses a shortcut, but now I'm making it do the full math.
Precisely. The system is having trouble rendering the cause and the effect simultaneously because it is suddenly forced to calculate your unpredictable interactions on the fly. The glitches are the friction between your expanding awareness and the system's rigid predictive models trying to keep up.
That makes perfect sense, but it also leads to a deeply relatable, yet entirely chilling scenario. You notice the audio delay. You notice the rhythmic looping of the conversation at the next table.
And you want to tell someone.
Of course. Naturally, as a social creature, you seek validation. You turn to the person sitting right across from you. Maybe it's a friend, a coworker, or just a stranger, and you ask them, "Hey, did you notice that? Does something feel off to you?"
And their reaction is the mechanism that really shatters the illusion completely. It provides the first undeniable confirmation that you are no longer in a shared organic reality.
The way it plays out in the source material is terrifying in its subtlety. You ask them and they just smile.
A polite blank smile.
Yeah, they politely ask what you mean, but as you try to explain the delay or point out the bizarre repetition happening 10 feet away, they simply stop listening.
They tune out.
But it's not that they are being rude or that they think you're having a mental breakdown and are awkwardly trying to ignore you. The narrative makes a very specific distinction here.
Yep.
Their comprehension of your words just shuts off entirely.
It's a complete cognitive block.
Yes. It is as if the concept you are describing physically cannot be registered by their neural pathways.
Well, if we look at this through the lens of a predictive simulation, these people around you are operating as extensions of that environment. Their responses, their thoughts, their emotional reactions, they were all part of the localized rendering.
So they're a part of the system script.
Exactly. When you introduce a concept that fundamentally contradicts the foundational parameters of the simulation, like directly pointing out the existence of the simulation itself, Their programming simply has no architecture to process that input.
It's like trying to open a massive, complex 3D rendering file on a word processor from 1995.
That is a perfect analogy.
Like, the machine doesn't get angry. It doesn't maliciously hide the file. It just literally doesn't know what to do with the data packet, so it drops it completely. It effectively does nothing.
The cognitive input simply drops. And once you observe this phenomenon, the veil is lifted. It becomes blatantly, horrifyingly obvious. You start to notice that the people around you are reacting to what you are saying before you even finish speaking.
Yes. Because they aren't listening to your words organically. They aren't actually reacting to you as a person.
Exactly. Their responses are being generated by the system's predictive behavioral algorithms. The system already knows the trajectory of your sentence, so it prompts the avatars to respond on cue.
It is a completely synthetic interaction.
Completely devoid of genuine, messy, spontaneous human consciousness.
Imagine the claustrophobia of that moment. Just think about it. The creeping, suffocating pressure of realizing you are suddenly awake in a world of sleepwalkers.
It would be incredibly isolating.
And worse, sleepwalkers who are neurologically incapable of even conceptualizing the fact that they are asleep. Naturally, this isolation forces a reaction. If you realize the people around you are bound by a script, you have to know how far the physical script goes.
You have to push it.
Right. You have to test the boundaries of the world itself.
Which initiates the system's first line of active defense.
Yeah, so if you want to prove the world is a construct, you do something entirely out of character. You break your routine completely. You get in a car or you start walking, and you travel somewhere you have absolutely no logical reason to go.
You go off script.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You head out past the city limits or into a deeply industrial area, intentionally searching for a physical edge. You are looking for the seams, a dead end, a space that feels unfinished, like a video game level where the developers forgot to add textures to the walls.
You're hunting for the rendering limit.
You find a dirt road that shouldn't logically end where it does. You step out of your car and you start walking toward it, and you expect to hit a wall, right?
Well, this is where the brilliance and honestly the sheer horror of the system's defense mechanism becomes apparent. We have this pop culture expectation of what the edge of reality should look like.
Right, like we expect to hit a painted concrete wall like in The Truman Show.
Yeah, or bounce off an invisible force field, or see a wireframe void out in the distance. But the system is far more elegant than that.
It is. It doesn't use physical barriers at all. When you approach what should be the edge, you hit an internal cognitive pressure.
A mental wall.
Yes. Your physical body resists moving forward, not because of a physical barrier, but because your mind completely refuses to process the space ahead. You actually hear a voice, but it's not a booming voice from the sky. It's a voice originating from the center of your own thoughts. And it simply says one word: don't.
It is a staggering concept. The system doesn't need to expend energy restraining you physically because it has already constrained you psychologically. The primary defense mechanism is entirely internalized.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the implications of that. If the system can just whisper in my mind and stop my legs from moving, that means the system doesn't just control the environment.
No, it goes much deeper.
It means my mind itself was manufactured by the inside of the system. I am the prisoner and the cell all at once.
That is the inescapable reality of a localized construct.
Yeah.
Every concept you have of an outside world, every fantasy of escape, every philosophical idea of freedom, all of it was formulated using the cognitive building blocks provided by the very system you are trying to outsmart.
So I literally lack the neurological vocabulary to imagine an outside.
Exactly. The prison is flawless because the prisoner's imagination is entirely bounded by the parameters set by the warden.
But wait, let's play this out. You hear the voice say, don't. And according to the narrative, a silent, seamless shift occurs in your mind right at that moment. The physical cracks in the world disappear.
The environment stabilizes.
Right. The very thought of questioning reality suddenly starts to feel ridiculous, almost embarrassing. You simply stop noticing the anomalies, you turn around, you get back in your car, and you go back to your normal life.
The reset is complete.
So I have to ask, what exactly is happening in the brain there? Is the system literally deleting your memory, formatting your hard drive, so to speak? Because if it has that kind of power, why not just delete the rogue thought the moment it appears?
It's highly unlikely to be a pure deletion, simply because of how human memory networks are physically structured.
Okay, how so?
Memories aren't isolated files, right? They are deeply interconnected webs of association. To perfectly delete the realization, the system would have to unravel thousands of associative neural pathways, which risks fundamentally breaking the observer's cognitive function.
Oh, it would leave massive, glaring holes in their consciousness.
Exactly. It would cause catastrophic brain damage to just rip the memory out.
So it's not a deletion, it's more like a forced archiving.
Think of it like an engineered psychological immune response. The system forces a reset by weaponizing your own psychological desire for comfort against you.
It uses our own laziness against us.
In a way, yes. It suppresses the memory, burying it deep in the subconscious, and floods your system with rationalizations. It is exponentially easier for the human ego to believe, I just had a weird moment of deja vu, I need to drink less caffeine, than it is to accept that the entire fabric of the universe is a synthetic lie. The system leverages your mind's own self-preservation instincts to heal the breach.
It pacifies you with normalcy. You go back to the coffee shop the next day, the audio syncs back up perfectly, your friends respond with what feels like genuine spontaneity, and you just laugh off the existential dread.
You go back to sleep.
But a forced reset isn't a permanent cure, because human curiosity is stubborn. The archiving wasn't perfect, it was just deeply buried. And when that suppressed thought finally claws its way back to the surface, the system's passive, internalized defenses are completely overwhelmed.
This marks a critical escalation in the narrative. We move from passive suppression to what can only be described as active systemic panic.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when the thought comes back, it doesn't come back as a gentle whisper. It leaks through the cracks sharper, stronger, and completely immune to that previous reset function.
The immune response failed.
Right. You think it again, what if this isn't real? And this time, passive containment fails entirely. The system realizes that the internal firewall has been permanently breached, so it shifts tactics.
It brings out the heavy artillery.
Yeah, it turns a massive, invisible, heavy attention directly onto you. You can physically feel the sheer weight of the simulation focusing entirely on your exact geographic coordinates.
And the manifestations of this targeted attention are incredibly disturbing because they corrupt the mundane elements of daily life. The system is no longer trying to subtly guide your thoughts. It is actively, desperately trying to shut down your awareness through sheer sensory intimidation.
The details of this collapsing reality from the source are so vivid. You are standing in a room, and the people around you, these avatars operating on predictive scripts, they suddenly pause.
They freeze for just a fraction of a second too long.
Yes, the natural timing of human interaction is completely broken. And then they turn to you and they ask, why would you ask that? Their voices sound normal. It sounds exactly like your friend, but they have wrong eyes.
Ah, wrong eyes. That is a brilliant articulation of a very specific biological phenomenon, the uncanny valley.
Right, the evolutionary revulsion to things that look almost human but aren't quite right.
Precisely. Evolutionarily, our brains are hyper-tuned to recognize the microscopic details of human faces. The tiny micro-expressions, the subtle movements of the facial muscles, the saccades of the eyes.
We look for the soul in the eyes.
Basically, yes. When we look at something that mimics those features but lacks the underlying genuine consciousness, our brain fires off massive alarm bells. Wrong eyes implies that the localized consciousness of the avatar has been temporarily suspended and replaced by the system's direct, overarching oversight.
Oh, wow. So the system possesses them.
In a sense, yes. It is the simulation itself looking directly at you through the hollowed-out mask of someone you care about.
That is so creepy.
It's deeply violating because it corrupts your most intimate social bonds to enforce compliance. It's using the face of a loved one as a security camera.
It's genuinely terrifying. And the breakdown doesn't stop at the people. Physics itself starts to buckle under the computational strain.
The physics engine starts dropping frames.
Exactly. Imagine what it would actually look like if the physics engine of reality started struggling. You watch someone drop a glass, it falls, it hits the ground, and it shatters into 100 pieces. But then it violently snaps backward.
The entropy reverses.
Yes. The shards fly back up, reassemble into a pristine glass, and it falls and shatters again. The exact same motion, looping unnaturally, completely defying entropy. And the most horrifying part, it is completely ignored by everyone else in the room.
They don't even see it.
They are still blindly following their scripts, completely oblivious to the fact that a localized pocket of time is skipping like a severely scratched CD.
This tells us something crucial about the system's resource management. It is losing its ability to render chronological causality.
Mhm.
It's dedicating so much processing power to containing your rogue awareness that the background physics engine, the rules of gravity, momentum, and entropy, is beginning to fail.
It's like a computer where the cooling fans are suddenly screaming like jet engines.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, the CPU is maxed out at 100%, and you are staring at a freezing screen, realizing the entire operating system is desperately trying to prevent a total crash. The system floods you with distractions. Conversations around you rapidly redirect, becoming louder, trying to pull your attention away. Ambient noise traffic, wind, machinery forcefully increases to deafening levels.
It's sensory overload.
Everything in the environment is screaming at you to look away, to stop thinking, to get back on the script.
But the observer refuses. That is the turning point of the entire narrative.
They hold the line.
Right. The system's escalation relies entirely on overwhelming the observer's senses, banking on the hope that they will retreat into ignorance out of sheer terror. But by refusing to look away, the observer forces the issue.
You stare directly at the delays. You stare at the looping glass. You lock eyes with the system looking through your friend's wrong eyes. And you force the realization from a passive question into a definitive statement. You don't ask, what if this isn't real anymore? You state, this is not real.
And pushing against that ultimate boundary does not break the physical world in the way we might conventionally expect. Reality doesn't shatter like glass or, fade to black like a movie ending.
No, it catastrophically halts the hidden processing engine entirely. Everything freezes, mid-action, mid-thought. The looping glass stops suspended in midair. The people are frozen like statues, their wrong eyes fixed forward. You are the only thing left moving in the entire universe.
Complete cessation of the simulation.
And the immediate aftermath of this freeze is described with such haunting detail in the text. You encounter a very specific, absolute type of silence. It's not just the quiet of an empty room. It is the literal sound of background processes being deleted, a total, terrifying absence of the world's internal hum.
Absolute zero computing.
Yes.
It's the sound of an engine being turned off. That ambient hum of reality, the subtle movement of air molecules, the distant vibration of traffic, the hum of electrical currents in the walls, the sheer vibration of existence is suddenly gone.
Just wiped out.
The observer has achieved their goal. They have broken through the simulation, but what they find on the other side is absolutely not the liberation they might have expected.
I am so glad we are getting to this part because this fundamentally flips everything we've discussed so far. With the simulation completely halted, the curtain is finally pulled back. We finally get to look at what the simulation was actually hiding all along, and the narrative visualizes this masterfully.
Imagine what exists behind the freeze. Picture a single, solid timeline extending forward.
Okay, I see it.
That single line represents your perceived life, the comfortable, predictable, chronological reality you just fought so hard to break out of. But without the system running to maintain that single line, it fractures.
It breaks apart.
It immediately explodes outward into thousands, perhaps millions of overlapping, aggressively branching paths.
Reality isn't a single track, it's everything happening all at once. It's a continuous selection pulled from concurrent variations. And this gave me a massive paradigm shift when reviewing this narrative.
How so?
I had assumed the system was malevolent. Like the systemic prison that the observer fought so hard to escape was a malicious trap designed to enslave humanity. I thought it was some matrix harvesting our bioelectrical energy.
That's the classic sci-fi trope.
Right, but it wasn't. It was a cognitive filter. It was a protective mechanism designed to shield the fragile human mind from the incomprehensible scale of infinite chaos.
That is the profound tragedy at the core of this entire concept. The observer's rebellion against the system was based on a fundamental, fatal misunderstanding of its purpose.
We thought it was a cage, but it was armor.
Think about human biology.
Sure.
We have biological filters that keep us sane every single day. We don't see ultraviolet light. We don't hear the extreme frequencies that dogs or bats hear. We don't feel the constant microscopic shedding of our own skin cells.
Oh, God, that would be awful.
It would. If we perceived all the raw data of reality simultaneously, our nervous systems would immediately overload. The simulation acts exactly like those biological filters, but on a cosmic scale.
So the system, the looping conversations, the forced resets, the cognitive firewalls, all of that was essentially a localized quarantine. It was wrapping the chaotic, infinite multiverse in a neat, digestible, linear package so you could wake up, drink your coffee, and go to work without your brain literally melting out of your ears.
Exactly. The human mind is finite. It is biologically and psychologically equipped to handle a singular, linear progression of time. cause then effect, past, present, future.
It has to make sense.
It requires a single, clean line of causality to function, to build a coherent narrative, and most importantly, to establish an identity. The system was actively pruning those chaotic, branching paths of the multiverse, forcing them back into a single, coherent narrative.
So by stating this is not real and halting the system, you didn't break out of a prison. You literally reached over and turned off your own life support.
You ripped off the filter.
Removing this protective filter doesn't lead to some glorious transcendent enlightenment where you see the truth of the universe. It leads to an immediate, catastrophic psychological unraveling.
Because stepping outside that filter exposes you to the uncompressed weight of all possible worlds simultaneously. You aren't just observing the infinite paths from a safe distance. You are forced to process them.
We have to really dig into the emotional and psychological toll of this because it is devastating. Let's talk about identity. Identity is entirely dependent on limitation, isn't it?
Completely.
Your identity, your memories, your personality, your name, your sense of humor was built to navigate exactly one path. You are the sum of the specific choices made and the specific events experienced on that single timeline.
Right. I am the person who chose to study this specific field, who lives in this specific city.
Exactly. But if you are suddenly exposed to everything at once, I mean, does the you at the center just vaporize? How does consciousness survive that?
It's the ultimate breakdown of the ego. Consider it this way. Your concept of self relies on a continuous narrative. If you remember turning left at an intersection, that choice defines the next sequence of events. But without the filter, you simultaneously remember turning left, and you perfectly remember turning right. You remember marrying a specific person, feeling the warmth of their hand, living a life with them, and simultaneously, with the exact same level of vivid reality, you remember never meeting them at all.
That's so overwhelming.
You remember dying in a car crash at age 20, and you remember living to be 100. How can a singular self exist under the pressure of completely contradicting realities?
It can't. It's like the ship of Theseus, but instead of replacing the planks one by one over time, every possible variation of the ship exists in the exact same physical space at the exact same moment.
The structure just shatters.
The narrative makes it brutally clear. This level of perception is fundamentally incompatible with the human mind. The you that you understand yourself to be cannot survive the introduction of infinite, contradictory truths.
The system kept you finite so you could exist. To be everything everywhere all at once is functionally to be nothing.
That is so bleak.
Without the filter, you are forced to process the raw weight of all these worlds until the singular you at the center simply disappears, eroded away by the sheer grinding friction of infinite possibilities.
But the horror doesn't stop at your own dissolving identity. Even as you, the observer, are fading into this fragmented state, you realize that the universe around you is in critical danger. The frozen world is unraveling.
Because the filter is gone.
Because the automatic filter is broken, the boundaries between the timelines are actively dissolving. Moments are losing order. Time is stretching unnaturally. Every possibility is trying to happen in the exact same space at the exact same time.
The physical reality is facing an imminent threat of total dissolution. Without the system to actively prune the branches and enforce causality, all the contradictory realities are collapsing in on each other.
It's like a cosmic pileup.
Yes. If nothing is done, existence itself will become a formless void of white noise, a state of maximum entropy.
And a choice must be made. This brings us to what might be the most agonizing part of this entire deep dive, the role of the architect.
The burden of selection.
Because the automatic system is gone. For any single version of existence to remain stable, the choice of which path to follow must now be made manually.
And since you, the observer who broke the system, are the only consciousness remaining awake in this unfrozen, unfiltered space, the responsibility of selection falls entirely heavily upon you.
You broke it. You bought it.
To keep the world from dissolving into static, your attention must act as the new boundary. You've inadvertently become the architect of the finite selection.
I am trying to imagine the sheer suffocating panic of this moment. You are just a regular person. 10 minutes ago, your biggest problem was that the barista was a little slow, or that a sound was delayed.
And now you are holding the universe together.
Now you must consciously filter every single timeline, every moment, and every outcome for every living thing on Earth. Just imagine the internal monologue required to maintain reality.
It would be pure terror.
Wait, if I let this timeline proceed, this person dies in a car crash. If I choose this one, they live, but a localized war starts over here. I have to decide. I have to pick the next frame of reality, and the next, and the next. For 8 billion people, if I stop paying attention for 1 millisecond, if I blink, everything ends in a chaotic void.
The scale of that responsibility is paralyzing. You are manually rendering the universe, frame by excruciating frame.
It constantly brings my mind back to mythological figures. It's like Atlas holding up the sky to keep it from crushing the earth, or Sisyphus pushing the boulder, or the Moirai, the fates from Greek mythology, spinning and cutting the threads of reality.
The fates are a very apt comparison.
But this is infinitely worse than mythology. Atlas was a titan. He had divine strength. The fates were ancient entities specifically designed for their cosmic task.
They were built for it.
There is no divine strength here. There is only a fragile, rapidly fragmenting human consciousness carrying the eternal, uninterrupted state of deciding reality with absolutely no possibility of ever stepping down. You can't take a break. You can't go to sleep. Ever.
This raises an important question, actually. What does this mean for the concept of free will?
Oh man, that's a deep rabbit hole.
It is. By forcing the chaos into a single timeline to save reality from dissolution, the architect is actively stripping away the infinite possibilities of everyone else. You are deciding their fates frame by frame. Are you a savior giving humanity a stable, cohesive world to live in? Or are you acting as a cosmic tyrant, denying them the absolute truth of the multiverse?
That is incredibly heavy, because every time you choose a timeline where someone succeeds, you are actively collapsing the timeline where someone else might have succeeded instead. You are playing God, but you are a God who is trapped in the control room against your will, sweating blood just to keep the lights on.
Furthermore, we have to question if the architect themselves even has free will in this scenario.
What do you mean?
Are you actually making a choice to save the world? Or were you simply drafted? Are you just fulfilling an inescapable systemic succession protocol?
Wait, I'm having a hard time buying that this was an accident. Are you suggesting that the system didn't just fail under the weight of my curiosity? It retired.
It is highly probable when you look at the mechanics of the event. The system is a machine that requires a conscious observer to act as the core processor to collapse the wave function of reality. The previous architect, whoever or whatever they were, perhaps reached their absolute psychological limit.
So they set a trap.
The subtle glitches, the delayed sounds, the looping conversations might not have been the system failing. They might have been the system deliberately leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, searching for a mind curious enough and stubborn enough to follow them to the bitter end.
The system was looking for a replacement.
Yes, a cosmic draft. You proved you had the relentless focus to break the system, which paradoxically meant you had the exact kind of focus required to run the system.
That is a brutal irony. You thought you were breaking out of prison, but you were just passing the interview for the warden's job.
It's the ultimate punishment for curiosity.
And just as you accept this eternal, agonizing burden, just as you start manually sorting the infinite timelines to keep the universe from dissolving into static, the source reveals the ultimate, cruelest twist of the entire structure.
The eternal loop of creation and containment.
This is where the trap truly closes its jaws around the listener.
Right.
As you maintain this structure, as you sit there for eternity filtering every outcome for 8 billion people, somewhere, right now, inside one of those infinite realities you are actively maintaining, someone is sitting alone in a crowded space.
Another you.
Maybe they are holding a glowing device. Maybe they are watching digital media, looking at a screen very much like the one you might be looking at right now. And as they watch, a small crack forms in their thoughts.
The system starts dropping breadcrumbs again.
A subtle feeling that something is unfinished. A tiny delay in the audio. And exactly as you did, they formulate a specific thought. They hear a whisper. What if this isn't real?
It's the birth of the next glitch. The inevitable cycle. There is no true escape. Because you are fundamentally human, the reality you construct to keep everyone safe will inevitably contain human curiosity.
We can't help it.
The very act of questioning the nature of reality is the catalyst that drives the entire cosmic mechanism.
So what does this all mean? The loop cannot be broken. Questioning reality guarantees the collapse of the system for that individual, which forces them into the frozen space, forces them to realize the devastating truth of the multiverse, forces them to take on the agonizing burden of the architect, and forces the cycle of destruction and painful succession to begin all over again.
It is a profound philosophical tragedy. The human drive for truth, our insatiable need for discovery and understanding, is exactly what triggers the trap.
That's what dooms us.
We cannot help but poke at the edges of our cage. We are wired to seek the truth. But the act of seeking freedom from the simulation is precisely what shackles you to its control panel. True freedom is an illusion. There is only the blissful ignorance of the filtered timeline or the agonizing omniscience of the architect's chair.
The system uses our best traits, our curiosity, our desire for truth, our refusal to blindly accept the world at face value, as the engine of our own imprisonment. You wanted to know how the magic trick was done. You demanded to see behind the curtain. And the punishment for figuring it out is that you have to perform the trick for everyone else, forever, until someone else figures it out and takes your place.
And the cycle continues, uninterrupted, stretching out across the infinite noise of the multiverse. It forces us to confront a deeply unsettling question. Is the truth always worth knowing?
Is it?
If the truth of existence is a crushing burden that shatters your identity, isn't the illusion infinitely more valuable?
It is an incredibly heavy weight to sit with. To recap this terrifying journey, we started with a curious observer simply noticing a fraction of a second delayed sound in a coffee shop.
A tiny little glitch.
We explored the neurological and computational implications of that glitch. We watched them push past the system's internal cognitive firewalls, ignoring the voice in their own head screaming, "Don't!"
Pushing right through the psychological defenses.
We saw them break the simulation, halting the processor of the world, only to discover that the prison was actually a vital biological and psychological filter. A filter protecting their fragile human mind from the devastating, identity-shattering weight of infinite overlapping timelines.
The raw multiverse.
And finally, we watch them assume the agonizing, inescapable role of the cosmic architect, desperately holding reality together, trapped in an endless loop where the search for truth is the very thing that guarantees your enslavement.
It's quite the paradox.
The next time you're sitting in a crowded room, maybe at a bustling train station or a busy restaurant, and you notice a tiny delay in a sound, a glass drops, but the clatter is just a millisecond late. Or you hear a conversation at the next table looping just a bit too perfectly, repeating a rhythm that feels mathematically precise.
What will you do?
Will you pull the thread? Will you force the issue, stare at the glitches, and risk shattering the filter that keeps your mind intact? Or will you let the system's quiet voice whisper, "Don't"? Close your eyes, take a sip of your coffee, and choose the comfortable illusion of the single timeline.
It's a heavy choice.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll leave you to ponder your own reality.